Hi everyone, and welcome back to another story from Damon Runyon's book on Broadway. Some short stories about life on Lower East Side Manhattan, and all the characters were there. Hope you enjoy this one. It's called Cemetery Bait. One pleasant morning in early April, a character by the name of Gentleman George wakes up to find himself in a most embarrassing predicament. He wakes up to find himself in a cell in the state penitentiary at Trenton, New Jersey. And while a cell in a state penitentiary is by no means a novelty to George, and ordinarily will cause him no confusion whatever, the trouble is, this particular cell is what is known as the death house. Naturally, George is very self-conscious about this, as it is only the second time in his life he ever finds himself in such a house, and the first time he is so far back in his youth that it leaves scarcely any impression on him, especially as he has commuted out of it in the less than 60 days. Well, George sits there on the side of his cot in his cell this pleasant April morning, thinking what a humiliating circumstance this is to a proud nature such as his, when all of a sudden he remembers that on the morrow he is to be placed in Mr. Edison's rocking chair in the room adjoining his cell, and given a very severe shock in the seat of his breeches. On remembering this, George becomes very thoughtful, to be sure, and sighs to himself as follows: "Hey ho, hey ho, hey ho." And then he sends for me to come and see him, although George is well aware that I have no use for penitentiaries or their environs, and consider them a most revolting spectacle. In fact, I have such a repugnance for penitentiaries that I never even glance at them in passing, because I'm afraid the peepings may be catchings, and of course in a situation such as this, I can scarcely deny to call on an old friend. They let me talk to George through the bars of his cell, and naturally I'm somewhat perturbed to observe him in this plight, although I can see that his surroundings are clean and sanitary, and that he seem kindly disposed towards him, except one big doorknob who is inclined to be somewhat churlish because George just beat him in a game of two-handed pinochle. Furthermore, I can see that George is in a pretty fair physical condition, although a little stouter than somewhat, and he looks as if he's getting some rest. He is at this time about 45 years of age. Is known far and wide as the handsomest and most genteel character on Broadway. His brown hair has now some gray in it along with the edges, and there are lines of care in his face, and of course George is not dressed as fashionably as usual. In fact, the clothes he need pressing, and he can stand the haircut. And the shave, of course. And when I mention this to George, he says he understands that they're going to give him all the haircutting he requires before morning, and maybe a close shave too. In the old days, Gentleman George is very prominent in the jewelry trade with Tommy and Trotter and his associates, and anybody will tell you that Tommy and his crowd are the best in the country because they pursue strictly business methods and are very highly principled. They generally work with a character by the name of Lou Adolia, who is a private fuzz often employed by big insurance companies that make a specialty of insurance jewelry for wealthy female parties. A fuzz being a way of saying a detective. Although the chances are Lou Adolia cannot really find his hip pocket with both hands. But when Tommy and Trotter and his associates come into possession of jewelry belonging to these wealthy female parties, they notify Lou Adolia, and he arranges with the insurance companies to pay a certain sum for the return of the merchandise, and no beefs, and everybody is satisfied, especially the insurance companies, because, of course, if they do not get the goods back, the companies will have to pay the full amount of the insurance. Now, as Tommy and Trotter is generally very reasonable in his fees on jewelry that comes into his possession, that really is a most economical arrangement for the insurance companies and for everybody else concerned. And it is also very nice for Lou Adolia, as he always gets a reward from the companies and sometimes a piece of what Tommy and Trotter collects. Then, a piece always goes to the stout fella, in the city in which Tommy Entrada and his associates are operating. Then the stout fella being the local fix, because of course you understand that in a business as large as this carried on by Tommy Entrada, it is necessary to take care of all angles. So the stout fella looks after the local law to see that it does not interfere with Tommy Entrada any more than is absolutely necessary. To tell the truth, well, when Tommy Entrada and his associates go into a town, it is generally well organized from top to bottom as standard oil, and Tommy not only has a complete roster of all the local jewelry owners and what they're insured for from Blue Adolia, but also a few diagrams as to where this jewelry is located, and Tommy never fails to make an ample provision for one and all in the town who may be concerned before he turns the wheel. In fact, I hear that in a spot up in Northwest, Tommy once even declares the mayor and the commissioner of public safety in one of the transactions just out of the goodness of his heart, and his unselfishness in the business operations makes Tommy highly respected far and wide. Anyways, Gentleman George is one of Tommy Entrada's experts in the matter of coming into possession of jewelry, and Tommy appreciates George's no little, as George is strictly a lone hand at this work, and he never carries the thing on him, and considers all forms of violence most revolting, so he never gets into trouble, or at least not much. I'm telling you this because you will understand that Tommy Entrada conducts his business in a high-class conservative manner, and personally, I consider him a great boon to a community because he teaches people the value of insurance. And now I will return to Gentleman George in his cell in the death house in Trenton, New Jersey. "Well," George says, "there you are, and here I am, and you are the only friend that comes to see me since the judge mentions that date that now becomes of some importance in my life, and which is in fact tomorrow. And now I wish to tell you a story, which we read the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the object of this story is to show that I once performed a great service to the public." At this, I become uneasy, because I'm afraid it may be a tedious story, and I do not care to remain in such surroundings listening to reminiscences. So I request George to epitomize it as much as possible, and to omit all references to low characters and sordid situations. And then George states as follows, and to wit is... Well, let's see what George comes out with tomorrow, shall we? Hope you enjoyed that first part, and doesn't look too good for Gentleman George, does it? Anyway, we'll see what happens, and stay safe, be careful, and see you soon. God bless. Bye-bye.